This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Tech, show number 125, recorded on July 11th, 2013. Here at Home Tech, we cover all your favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home, news, reviews, product updates, and conversations, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here in Bellevue, Nebraska, and we post the show each week with world-class show notes out at the AverageGuy.tv. If you have questions, comments, or contributions, we always love to hear from you. Send us an email, podcast@theaverageguy.tv. You can find me on Twitter @jcollison, or follow the show schedule on our Twitter account of the Average Guy TV. You can also join us for live chat during the show over at theaverageguy.tv/live. I was mentioning in the pre-show. I also put another button out there now. So there's the live button, and next to it is the YouTube high bandwidth option. So if you want to get a little bit better video, and I had to arrange the chat window below that to make that work. But if you click on that, you can get the YouTube. It's all set up, ready to go. I did have that all on one page, and I felt like that was confusing, so I separated them out. And I'd also love to have you join us on a mobile device, a tablet, or any Android, iPhone, Windows Phone, any of those kinds of things. I just enabled a low bandwidth streaming option with Livestream, and trying that out. So we had some success with it in pre-show. On the video, the chat doesn't work real well. It is Flash based, and I got some things to work with there. So for now, it would really only be to watch. Can you hear Sarah laughing back there? It would really only be to watch the show and not necessarily get involved in chat. But if you're on the road and you want to watch us, I'm interested to see if that would work. Send me an email, podcast@theaverageguy.tv, and let us know how that works out for you. All right, we've got a good show for you tonight. Christian will dominate the conversation. And Christian, I want to get a little update from you, but we've kind of promised folks that we'll talk a little bit, and this goes back to, I think it's episode 112. So if you go to the AverageGuy.tv/HT112, that's a show that you and I did, and we kind of talked about the college admissions process that you went through to get in, and kind of worked through that. Actually, that show did really well. A lot of hits on it. A lot of parents who are getting ready to put their kids into college or getting ready for that. It's a great show for parents that might have juniors in high school that are considering competitive college entrance programs at schools, maybe Tier 1 schools that have really competitive programs. Christian does a great job. About an hour and 20 minutes of him kind of walking through his experience. Again, I think that's HT112, so you can check that out as well. But tonight, by request, we had a couple folks over the last couple weeks say, hey, when's Christian going to do that follow-up about how he's going to pay for his schooling? We know that he's not necessarily 100% scholarshiped in, although that might be changing. I don't know. We're going to ask Christian on that. But Christian, let's dive right in. We're going to first talk about how you're going to, or the plan right now to kind of finance school. We'll get an update from you on NASA, and then we'll talk a little bit about big data. First, how are you, and welcome back.
Thanks. It's good to be back. Feels like with the July 4th holiday in between there, it's been a little bit longer than what it normally would have been. Everything's going really well in Hampton Roads and at the Research Center. There's a lot of exciting work going on with big data and with data mining and analytics. And really, in the last couple of weeks, I've made a good handful of discoveries, and some perspectives have changed. So that's all good stuff on that end. And yeah, on the financial end, there's a lot that has transpired since we did show 112 and talked about the admissions process. So I am looking forward to kind of breaking that down. And actually, it's a little bit interesting because I'm going to have to hit the rewind button and put myself back to where I was before I picked a college, and then kind of fast forward. So it'll be a little bit of a jump, but we'll make it happen.
Well, let's go ahead and dive right into that. I know for a week, I kind of promoted that all week. So if you came out to listen to that, let's dig right in. Christian, and I know Gary, your dad, big part of the planning involved in this as well. He's out there in chat right now, so he'll chime in, I'm sure, as we go forward. But back up a little bit for us as far as you need to back up, and then bring us forward.
Sure. So once you get kind of into that whole application process, and this is pretty much after you've submitted all your college applications, and before you've started to receive your main letters. You might get a couple early decision letters and you might get a couple early action letters, but normally this financial aid is that kind of whole application process will start before you get your regular decision letters for that whole pool. So if you're doing early decision, they'll normally make you do it right shortly after or before you submit your early action or early decision application. So normally kind of and again, I'm going to kind of fast forward and show you how things change, but there's a difference between thinking about it from financial aid and from the aspect of paying for college. And I know that sounds really ridiculous because you think, well, the whole point of financial aid is paying for college, right? But um, if you have the ability to start thinking that there's more than one way to crack at this problem, then you'll start to see what I mean. So when I started, I was kind of in that narrow focus. I was thinking here are the two primary ways I can do this. Either A, I get a scholarship to a particular school through, grades and transcripts and all that, or B, I luck out with financial aid. And when I mean luck out, I really mean luck out because it really depends on what school you're applying to and what their endowment looks like, what your numbers look like going in. So just to give you an example, if you get admitted to an Ivy League school, they will basically build a tuition that meets the price point that they think your family can reasonably afford. So it's almost like having a customized package where you can't go wrong for the most part, because even though the front tag price of an Ivy League education is almost like $55,000 a year, an average middle class family will only end up paying anywhere from like 10 to 15 of that, and the rest of that is just granted money because they have such a large endowment. And to give you an example of how large that endowment is, take Princeton University, for example, which if they were to stop collecting all the money that they got on a daily basis, they would be able to self-sustain and run themselves for 30 years without making any alterations to their program. So there's a lot of endowed money there. That's true with most of your Ivy League schools, and in some cases a lot of your private schools. And then with your public schools, you're not going to see that endowment. So that kind of really granted need-based financial aid will start to go away in that particular section of financial aid. The two main ways you will apply for financial aid normally are either A, through the FAFSA, which is the free federal government application that you fill out, and essentially it takes all of your numbers and from your tax forms and from your basic income statistics and family statistics, and they basically end up sending to all the schools you applied to what you fall in like this index of what FAFSA thinks you should pay. And that doesn't really mean that if you get accepted to that school, what FAFSA thinks you can pay is what the school is actually going to offer you. For example, you may end up seeing that the FAFSA only thinks that you can pay $10,000, but when you get accepted to a school, they can still charge you the full tuition price. So it's really just almost like an estimator for universities and colleges to match up and align with based on what their endowment is and what their interest is in funding your way to be there. And the second one is called the CSS profile, and that's more of a kind of a narrower focus that's coming out of the College Board. The College Board is, of course, the company that does the AP examinations and all the SAT examinations, and they also have this CSS profile that is more or less the same thing. It's used a little bit more for when you're doing scholarships, and it's used a bit more for some of the private upper tier schools, but it's really kind of a mix. So that one is more oftentimes than not going to be optional, but if you're looking at tier 1 or tier 2, you're probably going to see the CSS pop up a lot.
Christian, let me just jump in real quick and say, from a parental, filling those out, right? In most cases, the parents fill out the FAFSA, although my student, my older student, Phil, who's 24, is filling out his now for himself. But don't be fooled. There are places on the web that will charge you Don't use those
Yes.
places.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
free, right? The
Right.
government has a free site. And he pinged me one day and said, "Hey, Dad, where do I go?" And I said, "Just Google FAFSA and FA, FA,
FAFSA.com
yeah,
instead of .gov. Yeah.
right." And if you go there, they'll charge you. That's not the right place to go. Go to FAFSA.gov and get it for free. So just a warning.
Yeah. So, and one of the things that really helps with that is you will stress out because they really do it. They do a terrible job and of both on the university end and on the government college board side. They just do a terrible job getting their deadlines right. So if you miss a deadline by a couple of days, don't freak out, but it really helps to have your tax returns back like as soon as possible because some of those applications, depending on when you applied for admittance, affects when they want your FAFSA and CSS by. Um, I remember I sent mine late to like a half a dozen institutions primarily because the actual information wasn't available yet. So they wanted 2013's tax returns, yet that hadn't been processed by the government yet. So you really want to try and get your taxes done as soon as possible. Um, for example, we use, I believe, EG Tax or a similar service that, they pay $100 to do your taxes, and then you get all the nice, pretty printed out forms. And that's kind of a good way if you're worried about making mistakes on your forms and your numbers, and you just want your taxes done really quick. That's probably the best way to do it, and that really helps if you have this whole college application thing going on because those are very easy to just make copies of and fax. There's a lot that you have to fax, I know, for like Ivy League or some of the other applications. And then there's also with the CSS profile, some schools use their electronic upload service, so then you have to actually scan a bunch of stuff into the computer and attach it that way. So everything is more or less digital now. They really hate when you mail stuff, so try not to do that if you can help it. Um, if you have pains in doing that, one of the easy things you might be able to do is just get all your tax paper together at home and then take it into school, and they'll probably fax it for you. Your college guidance counselor can help you do that. Um, so those are kind of the two ways that you apply for financial aid. Now, one of the things with financial aid by its given nature is that it's not merit-based. So you're hoping that one, the school you're applying to has money, which is in my case not the case, and two, you're hoping that the um, you fall within a range where you're actually going to be eligible, because there's a lot of middle class families that have a bunch of people in school and are putting money in a bunch of different places for education and such, and they don't get anything primarily because the financial burdens they've had aren't always reflected in the FAFSA and CSS. So it's kind of a hit or miss thing.
It's
Really,
very confusing, to be
yes,
honest. And the forms are horrible,
yeah,
and especially the FAFSA forms. They've made a lot of improvements. And so, for example, like with my kids, I have 3 in college right now, and once you get 1 in school and you get in the system, it gets a little bit easier.
right,
That
right,
first time, it's a nightmare.
yeah, it really
And
is tough.
stuff starts carrying over for you, and you can link some records. They are getting better, but it's like anything in the government. It's taken forever. You hit on this in 2012. The 2012 tax season was horrible. The
Right,
government couldn't get their act together, right? We couldn't get taxes done. So for anybody filing for financial aid this year, I got to apologize. I mean, you're smack dab in the middle of this horrible tax mess. I know for Gary it was just a nightmare to get some of those things done. So it's not any better on any normal years in a lot of cases too. If you're a parent and you're going through this, let me just say, hunker down in a quiet place, make sure you're well rested, you've got your sanity about you, and then just work through it and don't give up till you're done. It just takes a while to get through it, and it's just difficult. I mean, there's no easy way around it, and there's no cheating. You just got to put the information in and get it done.
right. So, and really, the only guarantee that I know is normally if your total financial family income is under 60,000 or under 100,000, that pretty much says you're going to get something. If you're at an Ivy League school, they will basically pay your entire freight. if you're at even a lot of public schools, then you qualify for Pell Grants and all that stuff. So that's kind of like the thing that I can tell you. If you meet that range, yes, you're going to get aid. But like I said, once you get like above 100 but under 130 or under 150, it's any man's guess as to what they're going to give you. So don't rely on it at all, because
Yeah.
chances are it's not going to turn out for you.
Well, and I
Um,
think if you have any questions, you really do need to contact the financial aid department in the institution that you're going to, because even some of those are different in the programs they have available.
yeah,
And like you did, you might want to, as a parent or even a student, you might want to call those schools early. So call them in the fall and start asking them, what do you require from a financial aid standpoint, and what are my best chances for applying for grants and those kinds of things,
right.
and get that list done very, very early in the cycle.
Yeah, and one of the really good indicators that you can kind of find out quickly how well things will go for you if you're going the financial aid route is to look up the endowment size of the school. And based on whether it's private or public and what their endowment size is, will give you good indication as to what your chances are of getting money. Because,
Yeah.
for example, Maryland is a public school. There's 36,000 students, and their endowment is 700 million, which sounds like a lot. But then think about a school like Case Western, where it's 1.7 billion for 4,000 students. So they have almost three times. They have over two times the amount of money for a ninth of the student population that Maryland has. So obviously, your chances of financial aid and scholarship money are going to be better there, just by the nature of availability. Again, this is supply and demand at its finest.
Yeah, now Christian, in your case, right? I mean, programs matters, and so if you're a student that's going to study, or you don't know what you're going to study, and you're looking, to do that, you
Yeah,
might want to look at some of those smaller schools that have larger endowments to
right.
get in from and
Yeah,
if you got good grades, yeah. In your case, right? If we go back, University of Maryland, you're going to, some cybersecurity stuff that's going to be only available there. You really want to go to that school, kind of regardless of the financial situation, right?
right. Yeah. And that's actually a good segue into talking about the second avenue of funding college, which is scholarships. And I'll be honest, I think a lot of people they go into the college admissions process, and if they're feeling confident about what package they're putting together for college, they're thinking, I'm going to get scholarship money. And they don't really realize that it is cutthroat, and there's a lot of behind the, closed doors, behind the scenes stuff going on with that scholarship money. It's always getting reallocated and redistributed, so it's very hard to try and plan what you think you're going to get where, because um, the year before you could try and model off and look at what kids were getting online as like an indicator, and that could be totally untrue the next year. So it's really one of those dynamic situations that, yeah, you might look online and kind of get a sense for it, but treat it with a grain of salt, because really um, it can be tricky to say the least. And I'll just give you the Maryland example for me, right? So Maryland advertises 150 full ride scholarships that they call the Banneker Key Scholarship. And you think, oh, that's really great. I think I have a shot at that. I'm in the honors college, which means that's about 1,000 people and 150 who are getting selected. So, I have about a 15% chance just by the nature of going through the process, which is higher than a lot of other scholarship stuff is, right? But then you come to find out that a lot of the scholarships are, you only get a partial value of the full thing, so it's not really a full scholarship. But the one that really tricks a lot of people going in is, I was out of state, so this would have been a really great thing for me coming in out of state. But what you don't realize is it's much easier for Maryland to advertise that they can give out that many full scholarships if they're giving out full scholarships for in-state tuition price and not out-of-state tuition price. So lo and behold, a great majority of Banneker Key scholars live inside the state of Maryland, and I know of several that did get it out of state, but like I said, it wasn't as much, and that's kind of like one of those things where it's like, that's when you have to start to say, what is it that I'm really looking for in a school, and if it's really a place I want to go, then even if I don't get the scholarship money, I have to make it work out somehow. So that's when you'll live in your own little world of thinking you're going to get this and you're going to get that and this will come through, and then you get all the real facts that come in through the mail, and you have all the letters in front of you, and you know what your options are. And that's kind of when the little reality setter kind of comes in. And that's a really good thing, because you're going to think it's one of the worst days of your life. You're going to think, oh my gosh, I'm coming out with student loans and blah 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 blah. But take a chill, because there's ways of navigating it that you won't realize until you graduate. So just before I move on from scholarships, a couple thoughts. Scholarships are really, they can be tricky to work for you, but they do work for a lot of people. So you have to take them seriously. And just like you apply early and you put a lot of time into your college admissions process, some colleges will automatically grant you scholarships based on your admissions package and your application, which is why it's more important, all the more important to continue to do those to your best of your ability. But also for scholarship programs that have independent applications and such, you really want to do a spot-on job, because there's a ton of other people filling them out. So you'll get picked through like a weed really quick if you don't look like you were taking it seriously. Number two is realize that there are a lot of scholarships outside of the school you're going to. Just to name a few that you would never imagine, if you're an Italian, guess what? There's this massive Italian scholarship fund in the U.S. that if you apply for and you're Italian and you're doing awesome things, they're going to give you money. And why? Because they can, and there are other Italians who have money that want to make other Italians successful. It sounds bizarre, it sounds crazy, but these really weird profiles of what people are looking for to be scholarship donors is all over. And a great place for doing that as well is, I believe I mentioned this in the admissions process, I loved using capex.com. It had everything for admissions and everything for scholarships all in one place. Look at USA Jobs, or USA News World Report rather, for more scholarship information. Go to your guidance counselors, and they normally get a lot of handouts and mailers from universities that have scholarship listings, so check with them. A lot of military scholarships, so armed forces, you're very likely to, if you've either had a parent who served or similar, you have a good chance for qualifying for that. A lot of people actually pay for college with ROTC programs, so if you're interested in that, ROTC can be a good route. Keep in mind, there's always, for ROTC programs where they're paying your way, you normally end up having a back-end commitment of 4 or 5 years, but that's a viable route for people who want to stay in the military and who are interested in that, so that's good to keep in mind. And like I said, look for those private, third-party, off the beaten path scholarships. It can be, you want to kind of selectively pick which ones you're going to try and shoot for, though, because with the third-party scholarships, you're always going to be filling out a new application, and eventually you just kind of develop this recycled content where you just keep remorphing the same thing that you have, your spiel, right? So your life spiel just keeps getting remolded with different grammar phrases for every application. So you kind of have all the essentials, but you have to keep curtailing it to every particular niche, and you kind of want to make sure that you're not overextending yourself with the applications, because then you just do a bad job on all of them, and then you lower your chances of getting one.
There's also, Christian, in your local area, make sure you check with the local schools. Oftentimes, they, like my oldest son, we have a junior college. They actually awarded him for good grades. They gave him 2 free years of junior college, which anymore is, if you can go to junior college and knock out some of those expensive credits that'll transfer to maybe a tier 2 school. That save you, anywhere between $2,000-$4,000 a year in costs associated with that. So we did that. Also check with your local school on SAT scores or ACT scores. Some of your local institutions may offer half or 3/4 or 1/3 or something based solely on an ACT or an SAT score.
Yeah.
And so at the University of Nebraska at Omaha, I think that score is a 31 on the ACT. And so if you qualify for that, you get a really nice scholarship. I think that school is $8,000 a year, and you can get most of it covered with a 31 on your ACT. And so it's just like you're saying, check, the other thing, check with your parents' employer. They might have, they might have a scholarship program available.
Right.
Everybody loves to do that. Just realize, too, some of those scholarships are one-time, one payout, freshman year,
Yeah, you got to read the fine print.
Yeah. Well, hey, if you can get $1,000, it's $1,000, right? So
Yeah.
a lot of the scholarships are that way, but certainly Scour, there's thousands, from what I understand, there's thousands of scholarships every year that go unfunded or unpaid because students don't apply for them. They don't know to apply for them or give them out. There's some older ones that the companies are not that aggressive about finding people. They're like, they've been going on forever, but they don't have a good system for managing it. So that money just goes unused. So just make sure, like you said, make sure you're scouring it. Check your family lineage. Check your right, because seriously, that stuff matters. And
Yep.
There's more than one way, and that's not sports. You don't have to do sports to get those scholarships, right?
Yeah.
They certainly help, but
And especially with the SAT and ACT scores, a lot of state universities will go by that. State schools, public universities, that's a pretty, and especially at tier 2, that's kind of how they like to do things. Just thinking of a couple offhand, I know Michigan State does that, and there are several schools that are very highly rated that I would say are tier 1A, where if you get in the 33 and above range on the ACT, and I think it's a 1472 score on the SAT, you can qualify for some big money there, and that's at schools like University of Michigan Ann Arbor, NYU, maybe Boston College, Loyola University. So there's all sorts of stuff, and sometimes they will also use them not to automatically grant you scholarships, but they will use it as like kind of a pre-qualifier for pulling you in for an interview to see if you're going to get a half or full. So I know that I had a friend who ended up going to I think Richmond, University of Richmond or something similar, and he got a full ride kind of off that premise. He had a certain score range, and then they pulled him in for a Skype interview, and he got through the Skype interview. So that's always a good route. And so,
yeah. Hey, before we go any farther, let's quick introduce Andrew. Andrew just jumped in. Andrew, how are you? You came right in the middle of financing college discussion. You've got a while before you have to do that, but how are you? You're muted, though. Google maybe muted you. Give it a try. No. Oh, you're going to lose your opportunity to say hi.
Hi.
Oh, there we go. How are you, man?
Oh, look. Yeah, good. College finance is kind of different out here. We've already been talking to our accountant. I mean, the kids are 7 months old today, but our accountant pretty much tells us to pay off our mortgage and then worry about high school and college fees and stuff like that when we get there.
Yeah.
Which
we'll have to get a specialist from Australia and to talk about that, because I know it's very different there than it is here in the United States as far as just the way it works. So the last time we did this show, I think you and Rennie both had said, "Wow, that's kind of crazy," as Christian was describing. And let's remind folks too, Christian's experience is maybe not necessarily everybody's typical experience as he went after, but there's been a lot of things that he's had to do that everybody has to do. So it's a good experience nonetheless. So we'll have Andrew. You'll have to find somebody who's an expert in navigating the college arena there in Australia.
Look, my accountant would be the top bloke to do it, but his hourly rate, you couldn't afford it, Jim.
It'd be a $2,000 podcast.
Yeah, he wouldn't come on for my rate.
Well, hang tight. We're gonna get Christian through this segment, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about NASA, and then we'll move on to. He's been getting a little work in big data with IBM, and we're going to get caught up on that. So it's kind of not your typical home tech podcast, but that's okay. It's my show. I can do whatever I want. Okay, go, Christian.
So yeah, I think we pretty much got the picture of scholarships, the picture of financial aid, and then this is kind of the tertiary part that I'm saying. When the dust settles and you actually realize what you got is what you got. If you look and see a big price tag and you don't have a lot coming out of that, then you have a couple decisions to make. Either A, you say, this is my first choice school, but really not at a price range I can afford, but this is my second choice school over here, and that's a lot more doable, and I'll probably come out about the same place. So you should be comfortable with taking that if that's the position you get in. Loans err on the side of caution. A lot of schools will offer you subsidized loans, which will basically, those mean that the government's paying off the interest for you, so you're not incurring those interest fees, and you essentially pay the loan back after you graduate. So it's like, for example, if I gave you a $3,000 subsidized loan, the government would pay the interest, and once I got my bachelor's degree, I would pay that $3,000 a year back to the university. So it's almost like, let's just make up some fake numbers here. So your tuition is $10,000 a year, and your school offers you a $3,000 subsidized loan. And so that means that you're paying $7,000 a year for tuition, and then you would have $12,000 that was stalled and pushed to the back end. And so you could almost treat it like being in college for 5 years instead of 4, except that 5th year you're just paying back loans without interest and not going to school unless you go on to graduate studies. So you can just kind of think about delaying the pain without the interest. Unsubsidized loans, however, carry the pain as well, because those are not, the interest is not being paid by the government, you're paying the interest, and the interest rates suck, quite plain and simple. The unsubsidized normally is around 7% or so, which is a nasty bite, but the absolute one thing you don't want to do as a parent is get the Parent Plus loan, which is an exorbitant, I want to say, I might be thinking of it wrong, but I want to say it was at least a 12 or 13% interest if you took that Plus loan. And it just, stay away, stay away, stay away. If you really have no colleges on the table that's affordable for you, I would honestly recommend that you go to community college for a year and then wait to try again as a transfer the next semester or something, because arguably, if you improve as a person in that first semester of community college, you'll have a better, easier time getting in during the transfer cycle, because they have to fill spots of people who left. And don't feel crushed by that either, because to be honest, like I'll just kind of give you some examples. At least in my workplace at NASA, a very large percentage of people are in positions that they didn't even go to college to get a degree for. So they have a Bachelor of Science in, that's not even a thing. They have a Bachelor of Art in communications and public affairs, and they're a web developer, right? And that's one kind of situation that you'll see, which the moral of the story there is, if you can do the work and you can prove that you're worth their time, then it doesn't really matter what your specific degree title is for a lot of companies. And that's not true everywhere. I would say that's more true for computer scientists, especially because a lot of the top companies like Google and Microsoft are hiring college dropouts with kids that are absolutely brilliant at what they do at computer science but never cared about school. Again, those are not like regular scenarios, so don't think that's just going to come walking in your doorstep. But the other one I really want to touch on is community college, because I think a lot of kids feel like it's the end of the world if they go to community college, but I know some of the there's a very good so a little primer on NASA Langley economy, right? There are 3 universities that feed a lot into the Langley economy, and for both NASA and for the Air Force, the Langley Air Force Base. Old Dominion University, Christopher Newport University, and Thomas Nelson Community College are like the three local places that they feed. And really, if you look at them on a national scale, none of them rank very high for as like an overall university. They have good specific programs, as all colleges do. They have their strengths and weaknesses, but the important thing to get out of that is that the Langley economy kind of a lot of these people who have been at Langley for years and who are bright people went to these local colleges and did fine. And I know several engineers who work in the mechanical systems branch and the engineering directorate as a whole who, they went to community college for all 4 years and they landed these pretty awesome gigs at NASA on pretty awesome projects because they could do the work and they learned the skills at community college. And I think that goes to say that it means something when you can go to community college and then say, I'm working at NASA designing a satellite or launching a rocket.
Well,
So
in the end, it becomes about character and
exactly.
talent, raw talent,
Yeah.
not necessarily about education.
Yeah.
Let me just say this. We've had 3 go through the college system. Our oldest one started at community college and went to a university. The other 2 started at universities and have since come back out and gone into the community college system. Guess what I'm going to recommend for my 4th who goes to college? I want to say, dude, why don't you stay home and go to community college for the first year and let's figure some things out. You get on the big campus and you spend a bunch of money and it doesn't guarantee that it's necessarily going to work out in that university setting. And my number 2 and number 3, did that and ended up coming back home, putting themselves back in the community college system. So I totally agree with you. We have found that to work out really well. A lot of kids at 18 don't know, and I don't think community college is a failure. I think they're great systems, and a lot of municipalities pour a lot of money into their community college system to make them really good. And they're often this is the best part about it, Christian. They're often taught by local industrial leaders. So there's guys who work,
Right.
For example, we had some of our software architects for a while teaching Java at the local community college. Well, guess what you need when you get out of school? You need a job. If you go to a full-time university, those teachers are oftentimes tenured professors.
Yes.
They've never worked a day in their life. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it that way. They've never worked in the industry a day in their life, right? Not always. These community college professors, these are industry guys. And oftentimes there's great ways to make great contacts to get great jobs in those community college programs. So I totally agree with you. I've kind of become a community college convert over the last couple of years as I've actually seen that work out in our family.
Yeah, and so kind of this pulls into the tertiary thing. So in my case, I got to a point where there was a school I really wanted to go to because it was the best option that fit my needs, but guess what? It was a $40,000 price tag, and that's pretty pricey. But I'm working it, and this kind of gets into the third route that no one likes to think about when they're going through admissions, just because their mind's all right here, and then they start waking up into the real world and realizing that there are people willing to pay for you if you can do things. So whatever that is that you can do, become that shining star in that employer's eyes, because then they will take interest in you. So this kind of gets into the third part, which is recruiting. And this is a huge deal because there's several ways to approach this, and it's really kind of dynamic and flexible. And the number one word I can just summarize this with is go get it. They're not going to come walking on your doorstep. They're not going to ask you to fill out an application. Go get it. Go talk to people. Just talk to people. Don't even think about it. You need to just start making some ground level connections, because people talk, and people who are well established in the industry, they have connections at all sorts of different companies and opportunities that you could take advantage of any number one of those. So the people who are really successful at this third tactic normally aren't shy. They're very vocal. They're kind of out front, and they are, like I said, good communicators, and they make the right connections at the right time. And this kind of gets into the whole internship co-op thing, which I think is really a third way of funding college that not many people think to until after they're already there. But I think it would be a benefit if people thought about it more when they were in high school, if they know what they want to do with their lives. So for me, my goal this summer has been to put me in a position that by the time I start University of Maryland, I have an opportunity afforded to me that will pay for my college. That has been my goal, and that is one of many of my goals. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I just, it's not. If you focus just all on the money, then you're not going to get any money because that's not what it's about. So focus on your talents, focus on improving your talents, but really focus on working with what you have. So in my case, what I had was a research center with 10,000 people on it, and there's a bunch of companies and corporations going in and out of that, and a bunch of contractors. So I'm at the point with my particular program, the program I'm currently in that puts me at NASA is kind of it is, okay, so I'm going to give you a little quick primer on NASA. NASA is going to this, it's called OSSI, which is One Stop Shopping Initiative. I think it's ossi.nasa.gov if you want to take a look. And essentially that's called One Stop Shopping Initiative for all centers. So there's 10 NASA centers all spread out. So, and that is basically NASA's attempt to close. A lot of centers had like 3 or 4 different internship programs for their local center, and NASA wanted to make it all one application, all one process, almost like how we have the Common App now for all these different colleges and universities. So they're slowly starting to, close down programs and then merge it into OSSI. And so those, if you're on the internship side, you're going to probably be coming through the education side and then getting placed in a particular directorate that fits your skill sets. If you're coming in as a co-op student, if you're co-op, you're civil servant. So that gives you a lot of more benefits, but might involve back-end commitments and such. And then the third option, which is what is really a nice fit for me, is the contractor option. And in my case, because I came in through one of their education routes and I'm now trying to transfer in through the contractor route, that means I have to kind of find a good company that fits, that's a mutually beneficial relationship that does work on NASA. And that's one way of staying at NASA and getting a company that will essentially recruit you to work on NASA projects, but be part of their team and work on their company culture and what they're looking to get out of you, and then ultimately fund you and recruit you to get your way through college. In my personal case, that doesn't mean that I'm just looking for a company that does NASA projects. No, and this is lesson number 2: cast a wide net, and don't focus yourself in on thinking that this one opportunity that you find is just going to be, the thing, right? So there is a lot of different places where you can, some will just be purely contractor route, some they'll want you to work part-time and go to school part-time, some they'll give you scholarships on front and then back your commitments. There's all different aspects to it. And I just want to answer this one comment really quick because I see this comment that says, very few pay co-ops enough to cover more than the weeks you are there. So yeah, that is true, and this is part of my message about knowing what you get into before you really start to make a commitment. So just go out and find every single possible person who's interested in talking to you about an internship, a co-op, or whatever, and then rather than looking for the one that you want, look for ones that you can eliminate, that you say, this is stupid, I can't, it's not the right fit for me, it's just not what I want, and work on eliminating instead of saying this is what I want, because if you do this process correctly, your goal is to end up with 2 or 3 really good options, all of which you could see yourself at. And then that's a question of picking the one that you think is best and trying it out. Think of it as a science experiment. Treat it as a bunch of hypotheses and choose the best one. And depending on where you are with what you've done in school, what you've done with your careers, it's going to determine what the initial level of opportunities are that are available to you. But if you do your planning right and you're really good at what you do, you can get anywhere from, and this is a big range, but you can get anywhere from 4 to 8 or 9 companies interested in doing something with your education if you're someone that they think can be an asset to their corporate culture. And eventually with any, this is another thing to keep in mind, is that companies don't just do this because they're nice people. They do it because they want you to come work for them at some point. So
yeah, well, let me talk. That's a great segue, because this is what I do for a living, right? Part of my job is to hire interns for Gallup, who, we started with college students, and I started with graduate students 3 or 4 years ago, and have worked my way down each year. We've gotten a little younger and a little younger, where to this year, starting this calendar, or this academic year, we're going to start programs for high school students. And so high school students can come for a 18-week program, 6 in the hopefully 6 in the fall, 6 in the spring, 6 in the summer. There'll be pay involved for it, so there'll be a stipend, but they'll be working towards a scholarship, some scholarship money, and getting involved in that. And we pay our interns that come in the summer, even in the fall, and we pay them an hourly wage to be. It's pretty good. It's very competitive for the area and what we do. It's not slave labor like internships used to be, or at least used to be known as, for what we do. But Christian, it's a great way for them to come in. Many of them that are local, they'll work for us 40 hours a week during the summer, and then we'll keep them on in the fall and let them work 15 to 20 hours during school.
Yep.
They can make a little money during school and help offset the costs. They're already that way. For us, the benefit is that when they graduate, man, they're in, right? We're not doing it for our good health. We're doing it so that we can hire them right away, and they'll be totally in processed and ready to go in the system. It's a great program for us. It's great for them, and a lot of college students like to know that they've got a job coming right out of school, right? Because that's another thing you have to worry about, is what am I going to do when I graduate? And so you're right. I think internships are just incredibly powerful. One of the reasons why we started one at Gallup 3 years ago in doing that, because I knew they're a great entrance and a great way for us. So coming from the corporate side, we are interested in getting the best students that we can in the door, and so you're right. If you need to look around where you're at and see what local companies are offering scholarship programs in your area. And here in Omaha, Union Pacific, ConAgra, Cerner down in Kansas City, Mutual of Omaha, Kiewit, Gallup, we all offer some kind of internship program here. So there's plenty of money if you're willing to work for it too. You're doing that for the summer, right? You're NASA working internship, making some money doing that. If you're willing to work for it, it's another great way to fund it. Some of those larger companies also have scholarship programs that you can compete for during the year to get extra money as well. So you just have to check out those companies.
Yeah, and that's actually another thing that I think is important going into the college process. So yeah, Maryland might have a really terrible endowment for that kind of thing, but guess what? They probably have the largest density of technology companies around the campus. I mean, it's a computer science heaven for getting recruited and working for some of these companies. Defense industry, engineering, cybersecurity, data mining. I mean, for what my interests are in data mining and cybersecurity, there isn't a better place in the world to be, period. So kind of having that circle of corporations around my education is one thing that I really value about going to Maryland, is that I don't like just being cooped up in academia. Even if my entire way was paid, I would still want to work. That's just the kind of person I am. But I like having that hands-on experience, because you're going to learn stuff in corporations that A, is real world, and B, is real world problems, but C, they're just not going to teach it to you like they do in a classroom. So classroom, they're they're applied, they're theoretical problems a lot of times when you get in your upper level courses, and they teach you a bunch of subset. You could go through that, get 100 on all the courses, and still be a terrible prospect for a job because you have no real world experience and you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like people who are extremely smart but they've never read a news column a day in their life, and so they walk out into the world and they have no idea how their government works. They have no idea about politics or whatever. They're in their little insular bubble of, I know how to add math and I can do these quadratic equations, and great. Who's going to hire someone who can do quadratic equations on their own little notepad? And then the other big thing is, it's great if you can do all these cool things, but if you can't communicate it to other people, they're going to be like, yeah, we'll find someone else, because they'd rather have someone who could communicate ideas that might need a little more work than someone who has these brilliant ideas who has no idea how to explain it to the other people on his team. So if there's one skill that you want to develop the most in this entire process, it's communication. Interviews for college admissions, scholarships interviews, recruiting interviews, being able to work effectively in a work environment, that's all communication. And so, especially in the environment I'm in, I'm required to do presentations and technical writing and fill people in on what the heck it is I'm doing, because I go off in my little world and go data mine this and that and build this and that, and then guess what? I have to suck myself back out and then say, okay, well, here's what I've been doing for the past week. Because if I can't do that, guess what? You're out the door. So, and that's true with many corporations. They don't want to hold on to people who are going to sit in a closet and not do anything. That's not just that's true for the most part. I mean, if you're like extremely good, and I'll just give you an example. If you're a nuclear physicist and you're in the military, you'll probably be, cooped up in some room someplace doing things that no one knows what it is you're actually doing, and you're serving your country and doing a bunch of awesome stuff, but you'll be isolated from the world because that's what your job requires. So there's those cases too. But for the most part, even those people have good communication skills, because otherwise they wouldn't have gotten there.
Yeah. Christian, I don't want to interrupt, but I want to put a bow on this. We're coming up on some time constraints, and we don't really, but I don't want to make this podcast last too long. I want to get to a little bit of updates from you with what's going on at NASA and some other things as well. But you kind of covered a lot of those. Anything else that you really want to get to when we talk about the whole being able to pay for it?
No, I would just say, so your three groups are financial aid, scholarships, and internship co-op recruiting, and make sure you're investigating, make sure you're reading carefully, always with anything plan well ahead, because even though deadlines are posted on websites for stuff, especially if you're going the recruiting internship route, things happen slower or faster than you are expecting. So be ready for anything. Make sure you have your resume, your work portfolio, samples of what you've been doing ready and pristine ahead of time, whether it's for a college application, a scholarship, or a job interview. Those are just requirements across the board, so have them ready to go.
Yeah, and let me a little point of advice. Any kind of as you're going through the interviewing process, and we're famous for this at Gallup. We kind of have a web assessment we take you through, and it's a 30 minutes, all these weird questions. We take that stuff seriously. When an employer sends you through those kinds of things, don't I can't tell you how many students later say, oh, I didn't realize that was important. Yeah, that part was important that you went through, and
if you ever want all the answers to the Gallup web portion, I can give those to you.
Oh, hey now. Don't do that. But Christian, you mentioned, and we'll use this as a segue into what you're doing with NASA. One of the things, I've been working with interns now for the last couple of years, and one of the things I hear from them over and over and over again is that work experience changes the lens at which they see their education for the rest of school, because they do get this real world experience, and they realize, oh, the enterprise is so much different than what the kind of education I'm getting. And I'm sure, we talked to you last summer when you were doing a very similar internship. I'm sure that last summer, changed the way you approached your senior year, going into this year, as well as what you see in the future. So tell us tell us a little bit about, and if you want to know how much it changed, just go back to the past episodes of the Average Guy TV and listen to Christian before he went to NASA and then after, and the proof's in the pudding right there. But give us just a quick update of what's going on with your internship there at NASA right now.
Sure. So we're kind of at a what I would call a crossroads, in the sense that the center is really looking at how we can be technologically savvy for the next 20 years. So it's called the Center Digital Transformation and the Revitalization Efforts. And what that essentially is getting all these different groups for data mining and all these different technological focus areas, and making a roadmap for what we need to do for the next 20 years to be where the industry expects us to be, and be where NASA needs to be in order to continue doing the awesome things we're doing in space and so on in the aerospace industry, especially for Langley. So I'm in particular focused in the data mining and the big data part of the CDT. And so what that means is I'm taking the things that I've been doing from the past year with the physical systems and the physical architecture, and then trying to map it to a future roadmap and a future architecture. So we have a very good relationship with IBM. IBM has been a long time partner with NASA for many projects going back, I believe, as early as the 90s, not just at Langley. That's a center-wide thing. And IBM is like that with many government agencies. So they're like many companies, very large companies. They have a private industry side, and then they have like their federal government version. So there's a division of IBM called, guess what, IBM Federal, and they service directly all U.S. government clients. So we're in the process of working with IBM to kind of design the future knowledge assistant that's going to automate the way we can help scientists and researchers, all using existing technologies that are available on the not the web, but available to companies and such. So my particular focus right now in the now has been trying to design an architecture that takes advantage of some of the things that companies like IBM specialize in, and also taking advantage of a lot of the evolution of open source technologies. So in the world of big data, I'm sure anyone who's even kind of read about it briefly has heard the words Hadoop and MapReduce, or Apache and Apache Software Foundation. And those are all very powerful software platforms. Just as a very quick technical overview, Hadoop is a distributed file system that is designed to be run on commodity hardware, and MapReduce is essentially the querying language that goes on top of that. So Hadoop can store petabytes of unstructured or semi-structured textual, numerical, whatever type of data it is. It's especially designed for textual, though, onto this distributed file system, where the evolution of hard disks are as follows. The storage space continues to grow exponentially, but the transfer rates do not grow exponentially, and they've been pretty linear in its progression and life cycle. So the Hadoop answer to big data, with a traditional SQL database and traditional data architectures and what we would call relational and transactional data structures, we can't query 2 petabytes of data and get a result in 30 seconds. With this new era of what we call NoSQL and distributed, we can, because the Hadoop distributed file system architecture basically holds segments of each files on different clusters, and then there's a master node that, when a file is retrieved for, it picks up each little part of that one file across all the different computers and pushes it all out at once, so you don't get across those transfer limitations, and it's very fault tolerant and resistant for large data. So then, just like SQL has a SQL querying language, MapReduce is this kind of, everyone likes to make it more than what it is, but it's really mapping your data and then reducing it to a smaller subset that eventually gives you resulting data. So this technology came out of a Google white paper. When no one else was dealing with big data, it was just Google at the time. This was probably back in 2000, 2001. Google was the only company in the world collecting data large enough to have this problem. And they were running into this problem when they were indexing the web, where they couldn't keep up with their log files and their metric files and some of their index files for their server. So they had to kind of start coming up with ways to get around this. And so they developed their own internal implementation of the MapReduce Hadoop system. And then eventually, I think it was around 2006 or 7 that they actually wrote the white paper on it. And then Doug from Yahoo and a couple others read that white paper, understood it really well, and then made the open source implementation, which became Hadoop. And then the Apache Software Foundation eventually became the home of the Hadoop project. And really, Hadoop has changed the way we can answer the data mining problem, because now we have access to petabytes of data. We have access to building predictive insight systems and predictive analytics, and all of these software packages that we're starting to see from the commercial industry are built on the open source Hadoop MapReduce implementation. And then, like in the private sector, they build their own specialized commercial versions. So IBM has their big InfoSight server, which is essentially the IBM version of Hadoop, and you're seeing this everywhere. Hortonworks is another big name in the business, and so eventually you get to this stage where, yeah, now you can query and store and access petabytes worth of data as if it were, a gigabyte or a megabyte in, a couple seconds, and that's all well and good, but what are you actually getting out of that? And it's a couple things. Your ability to do analytics and predictive insights is as good as your data that you're feeding into it. So crap in, crap out is kind of the message there. But now we're starting to build what I like to call, and what the industry and IBM is calling, cognitive systems. So if you take a look at IBM Watson, which is kind of one of the major commercial aspects of this, IBM Watson, it hands down defeated the 2 top Jeopardy contestants in the world back in 2011, and that was using a deep QA technology where you essentially it feeds in a question from Jeopardy, and the machine has to spit back the absolute right answers if any other Jeopardy contestant had to go for it, and it did very well. And why? Because of things like Hadoop and having a distributed file system and the power of the IBM architecture. A new topic in computer science that's becoming very prevalent, which is natural language processing, abbreviated NLP, and that is essentially the system automatically trying to understand the English language or whatever language is, the correlations of verbs, nouns, adjectives, and making sense of it and starting to think like our language processor in our brain thinks. Then you have machine learning, which is machines learning when something good happens, it remembers that good experience, and when something bad happens, it remembers that as well, so that as it continues to have experiences and traverse across data, it starts to build this understanding and this knowledge pool of what is good is what is bad, so it continues to get spot on. And so it sounds ridiculous, but it's almost like a dog. When you train your dog, the dog gets really good at doing certain things. And now we're training machines to understand human data. And this is where everything gets really fantastic, is when you can combine a distributed system that has just, let's just say for our purposes, infinite amount of human data and knowledge with a system that can understand how that knowledge is being conveyed, the English language, and can learn from experiences of understanding that data, machine learning. And there's kind of a subset of other technologies involved in this. With IBM, it was deep QA, question answering. But when you have these core set of technologies, your system can do some pretty awesome stuff. And that was kind of what happened with IBM. A lot of companies now the difference between the financial industry is now becoming who has better predictive analytics. So the people who are making the most money on Wall Street are the people who have the best machine learning computers out there predicting the financial data. The people and this is where things start, the potential for amazing things just takes off. So now we can predict where crime is most likely to occur automatically. We can predict where traffic congestion is most likely to occur, and that's all well and good. But that's only kind of one aspect of what big data can do for us. The other aspect is, a machine can read and understand these reports and these big technical documents as any human could in seconds. So imagine how smart you would be if you could read a million medical journals in one day. You would be Dr. House, out there with steady hands, saving cancer patients and the like. Well, guess what? That's what Watson is doing right now. IBM is partnered up with WellPoint and Kettering Medical Center. And as a little context, WellPoint is the company that owns Blue Cross Blue Shield, which insures 1 in 9 Americans for health insurance. And they essentially have an automatic medical advisor that it's not designed to replace the doctor, it's designed to aid the doctor. And this machine is giving doctors on their iPad, they just put in the symptoms that they're seeing from the patient, and Watson comes back in 60 seconds with the top 3 recommended treatment options, and it gives confidence levels and reasons why that treatment should take place. And if you don't think it's successful, think again, because they're already showing and have proven that in many cases, Watson has the current intellectual capacity of a second-year medical student, but then again, across all these different medical journals, that doctors can only spend about 4 or 5 hours reading medical journals per week, and Watson can spend time reading as much as it wants. So just for an example, Watson is 65% more likely to accurately predict lung cancer than your own cancer specialist at your hospital. That is tremendous. So if machines can better predict your symptoms and figure out treatment options that your doctor may have not considered or may have ruled out because the medical standards of his time have since changed, that's huge. Now you're also starting to see in the consumer era, they came out with Watson Engagement Advisor, which is essentially changing the way marketing works, the way advertising works, and that's actually a whole nother section of data mining and big analytics. I mean, how do you think Facebook recommends your friends? How do you think Amazon knows what product it is you're ready to buy? They're building recommendation systems off this big data, so they can query all the data that they're generating in the history of their data in seconds. And that's what, when you go and buy that motherboard, and then that system, as soon as you hit that purchase button, is looking at your profile of who you are, how it's similar to other people who have bought types of stuff, and before you know it, the system is putting 2 and 2 together. That's how Facebook gives your friends. That's how your shopping is now working. That's the next generation of advertising, plain and simple. But it's also changing the successful rate at which businesses can compete. So businesses that are taking advantage of analytics are 80% more likely to outbeat their competitors. And let's just take an example. So Rackspace is one of the biggest cloud one of the big players in the cloud industry, and one of their big divisions is MailTrust, which Rackspace Exchange, that's all email servers, right? So what Rackspace does is they have logs. So one of the really cool things with this whole Hadoop technology is that it's really awesome for analyzing your logs, especially when you're generating terabytes worth. And so Rackspace records, obviously, the IP address and the email, and they can pin a geolocation of all of these emails that are going through their system, right? And then what they do is they use Hadoop in their MapReduce queries to plot that on a world map, and then they can see the highest frequencies of usage on the map, and then they know when they have to build new data centers, they know where to build them because they build them where the highest frequency of mail is moving. and that's what makes them faster than their competitors, and that's why they ultimately make more revenue. So that's kind of the area of data mining and analytics that I like to call business analytics, and that's a very large part of what the goal of big data and data mining is. But and that is something that I'm trying to incorporate in how we do things at NASA and in building machines and applications that we use on Center to better reach out to scientists and researchers based on data that we collect about how they use our systems. But really the thing that's more interesting for me is using this data to help answer big problems in science, in research, and math. So you know, I have my head buried right now in atmospheric science data. I have no idea how to read and interpret atmospheric gases and aerosols and the radiation budget and the swaths and where all the orbital positions are, but I'm trying to learn really quickly, because if I can understand the data set, I have relative confidences that I can then go ahead and build a data mining system that can find things that I can't find even if I perfectly understand this data. And so that's one of the major goals that Langley has and NASA has for data mining, is answering some of these science questions that we are continuing to, you know, we collect all this really good data. It's really well structured. It has official formats. There's a lot of different formats and different syntaxes, and we have to know where that data is, how well the data stewardship is. But once that's all in place, which at NASA a lot of times it is, we want to build analytic systems that are helping us answer these questions in tandem to our human brain power. And the way IBM likes to put it, with the era of Watson, we're at what we call static cognitive systems. And a static cognitive system has the ability of memory, of learning, and of speed, all things that a computer can do faster than the human brain. But then we're going to start going from static to dynamic systems, and from dynamic to autonomous systems. And what the point of that is we're never going to get rid of the programmable era of computer science. So since the early 1900s, computer science has had an evolution, right? And starting in the 70s and going to, I would say, modern day, we've still been in the programmable era, where we program systems, they help us to do specific tasks and do them well and do them fast, and we build many of them. And that helps us promote and move our environment. But if you have that capability, and what you put on top is all of our human knowledge in what we call big data, what you get is systems that can start to think, and any experience that we've had as humans with our intellectual capacity, if we give systems the same opportunity to take that on across all of our knowledge and experience, my goodness, it's a gold mine of opportunities for changing the medical industry, as with Watson is now, for changing how we do our businesses, for changing science and research. So really, this is a grandiose vision. Many of you think this is something out of a sci-fi magazine, I know, but when you sit in this kind of data mining seat, things are changing really fast in the computer science industry, and the enterprise is the first person to get the wake-up call. No one in the consumer industry, small, medium business, or the home industry is seeing it, but my goodness, in the enterprise community, it's here, and everyone is scrambling, because everyone in the enterprise community realizes one thing, and that is that they're behind. And just to put it in perspective, all of the world's data from the time cavemen were walking to 2003 is being generated per year in our current cycle, and that's on the order of 2 zettabytes. And you don't even want to look up how much 2 zettabytes is, because then you start to realize that it's about 2.5 quadrillion something crazy, and it's not quadrillion because it's another really crazy term. But we are generating more bytes than we know what to do with, and 80% of that data is unstructured. And being able to take advantage of that is the next step for computer science, and eventually that will have a really nice tie-in with artificial intelligence. And I think in the computer science industry, artificial intelligence has hit a little bit of a roadblock. They're trying to get around some things, and they really haven't gotten systems that can think for themselves. A lot of them is what AI scientists like to call it as kind of scams, but they're small steps in the right direction. But I can't even wait to see when the big data track meets up with the artificial intelligence track and the two marry, because then there's going to be no stopping these machines. But even right now, we're seeing a ton of benefits and progress out of big data and data analytics. And by 2015 even, the landscape is going to be fantastic. And for people who are graduating out of computer science and who are starting computer science in college, this is such a prime time to get involved in data analytics and data, because the questions companies are asking right now, yeah, you have your chief technologist, you have your CIO, but guess what the new title everyone's getting ready to ask about? Who's going to be the next chief data scientist? That's a term no one even thought about in their HR department until about last year, the end of last year. Chief data scientist, people are now starting to take really serious because they realize they have to understand their big data in order to be ahead of their competitors, and ahead in their research and their science and their design. And the expertise for that is twofold. So you need computer scientists, but you also need mathematicians. And they're predicting that we're going to fall about 100,000 short in mathematicians, but we'll have plenty of computer scientists to get the job done. So really, if you're into math, you have a lot of potential coming up if you're good at math. So get a math degree. But if you're in computer science, hey, and you're in college right now, go see if you can minor or double major in mathematics, because it's going to blow doors open if you want to go into data analytics. So that's kind of what I'm doing. It's what I'm interested in. It's kind of what I love right now, and it's what I'm living and breathing. So I'm stuck reading books and manuals and doing a lot of write-ups. So
Nice.
I'm hoping I can, once I've settled the dust, make this available in a public space someplace. But
So, Christian, two thoughts. One, at Gallup, we would call you fully engaged in what you're doing at NASA. So, whatever NASA's doing, they're doing right. You are very, you're very passionate. You're very well spoken in it. I mean, that that was a nice 15-minute run on kind of big data and what it means, and really kind of the average guy. And there's a lot of chat going on. I don't know if you were following all that. A really good, in a lot of way, average guy explanation of what really big data is, the implication of big data is going forward, in the sense that you didn't use any deep technical terms. You really kind of talked about it from a practical standpoint. So, I appreciate that. It was good. It's easy to follow. It's good stuff. Two, I was thinking, man, I got to find a way to pay you to come out to Omaha and talk on this. One, so I can, meet you in person for the, for the first time. It'd be great. But two, I really think you got some good stuff in there to talk through. And if you're not putting a presentation together of some kind that you use as a roadshow, you absolutely should be putting something together, because you can do that. You do it very well. So nice job on the update there. Andrew, did you survive through that? Are you still with us?
I think my head's exploded. I'm an infrastructure guy. As long as the operating system's running, I don't care about the data store.
Yeah, but you got to live. You got to live.
That's for Oracle guys. That's for Oracle guys like you to worry about, Jim.
Yeah, no, but you got to live in that space where it's just the infrastructure implications are getting fairly serious around all this big data as well.
Yeah. Look, and I mean, I know from a clustered. I'm more into clustering and distributed computing, but when you look at some of the stuff that we're bringing to the market with Moonshot, the scalable architecture argument sort of ties in very well with being able to process that obscene amount of data that Christian was alluding to before.
Yeah, and I mean, what you're doing with the infrastructure, I mean, kind of hardens home the point that we need a lot of different expertise to pull off big data, and that's what companies realize too. So like, we need good hardware infrastructures and good distributed computing in order to even mount a file system that, in this case, HDFS, that can handle this big data.
Yeah, and from a pure scalar architecture perspective, I'm just looking at part of the Hadoop wiki, and there's a item here about Facebook They've got two major clusters running this technology. One of them is an 1100 machine cluster with 8800 cores and 12 petabytes of raw storage.
Yep.
The other one's a 300 machine cluster with 2400 cores and 3 petabytes. And that's an amount of data that I mean, we don't even see that with our banking clients. You know, that much data. It's almost impossible to comprehend that any organization uses that much data.
Yeah, we generate a lot on Facebook.
And one of the big things they realize now is a lot of that data has gone unanalyzed and unused. And so companies that aren't taking advantage of the own data that they're generating are losing out on opportunity. And that's kind of one of the big business analytics cases for data mining. But like I said, there's the more kind of research, science, and improving society really is the other aspect that I see data mining as, and that's how IBM is treating it. I mean, obviously IBM is a business, and they're a really wealthy business, and they're in the business of doing business and doing it well. But they have, when they do their business really well, they kind of have they go for, you know, big things. That's why they always do their challenge projects. I think they set it for every 10 years. So, for example, Deep Blue back in the 90s that beat the chess champion. That was a big achievement in you know, building a processor that could handle all those different calculations. And Watson was their next decade challenge, and it really was, I think, a worthwhile challenge for them to do because it brought them a lot of business and it helped advance the technology a lot. And like I said, the horses are just starting to break through the gate with this, and really, I'm excited to be where I am at right now because I can tell just by where I am with where I am in work and what types of assignments I'm kind of putting together and what type of architecture I'm putting into place. Everyone is just starting, so it's like a brand new thing that my generation is going to get to mold and build out, which I'm really excited about. And really, the technology is here to stay. It's just like the FAT file system was developed in 1965, and guess what? You still format all your USB drives with the FAT file system. It's the same thing with this HDFS, the distributed file system. Is going to be here for at least another 50 years. No SQL, which is the inverse of SQL, is the answer to the future of data processing. It's designed for big, scaled, fault-tolerant, queryable, and really, we're building machines that are now more than just I can run a task really well, I can run a program really well. We're building systems that can, with our help, start to think. And that's not cognition yet. That's why we're calling it static cognitive systems. But we're going to get to a point where we can simulate it so well, it's going to be very hard for people to tell the difference between reality and what's simulated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Which paves a very futuristic discussion for when we cultivate the machine learning technologies that we're starting to implement and you're starting to see in commercial industry and such, when we get really, really good at that, that's when computers should have the tools, I would say by 2050, to start writing their own software. And it sounds ridiculous, but imagine what happens when your computer starts writing its own code, and that's when you know that's when you know it's over.
It's all over. Skynet. It's all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's some really, really interesting things. You know, everything follows science fiction, and of course, we've seen a lot of, you know, just in the predictive. You had mentioned that early about being able to predict crime, right? Of course, that was the premise of. Oh, it just slipped me now. What's the Tom Cruise and the, you know, or they controlled the computers.
Person of Interest will do just as well.
Yeah. Well, exactly, and probably in a more realistic way than that.
Watching.
Yeah. It's We certainly have a lot to look forward to. Guys, I'm going to land this for the recorded show. We're at about an hour 20, and we'll thank those who made it all the way to the end of the recorded content and say, hey, appreciate you hanging out for doing that. If you've done that, that means you're a really engaged home tech listener. I know a little bit different tonight. Again, it's my show, so I can do whatever I want, but really important to kind of catch up with Christian and get some, what's going on. We had promised a second episode on financial aid and such for doing school, and I had a couple people actually in the last couple weeks say, hey, when are you guys going to do that? Real interested. And now would be a good time. Folks are getting ready to send their kids off to school, and if you have any questions around that, I'm not a financial aid expert, but I did sleep at a Holiday Inn Express last night. And I've done it a few times, so we can start that discussion. Head out to our Facebook group. If you go to theaverageguy.tv/Facebook, that'll take you right to our Facebook page, and it's a great way. Just ask to join if you're not in there already. And a great group and some good conversation. You guys are dynamite out there in the Facebook group, and I appreciate all that you do out there. It's just a great way. We don't have forums. We don't really need them at this point, but a great way to communicate on that. I want to remind you also, we're doing the Home Server Show meetup September 21st out in Indianapolis, Indiana. And we have got about 50 guys, I'll say 45 at this point, 45 guys lined up for this tech event over the weekend. We have enough room for 90, so if you were thinking about going at all, head out to homeservershow.com, and there's some links out there on how to get signed up. We have an Eventbrite event set up that you need to RSVP to, or you won't get in the doors. We've got to, it's going to be big this year, so you want to be a part of it if you're out there in the area at all. I'm making the drive in, coming across from the west to the east, and there's all kinds of folks coming in from all different directions. We've got some East Coast, we've got some South, we've got everybody represented, and it's going to be a great meetup. So join us for that as well. I did start a new Drobo owner site out on Google+. I'll put the link for that in the show notes if you own a Drobo and you want to join me out there. Some weird things are going on at Drobo. They just mentioned it earlier. I'm a Drobo fan. I am.
Drobo Nut is
We'll
more
see.
accurate.
I just love the products. I do like what they do, but they just merged with Connected Data, and then my son John was working for them, and he's not anymore. They downsized a little bit on their support staff, and he'll be moving on to a different tech team over there at EMS. So I don't know, some changes going on at Drobo, real interesting. But I started a group. Their forums are closed, and if you want to talk about Drobo in an open forums community, you can head out to Google+. Just search Drobo owners, or head into the show notes of this show. This will be show 125, so theaverageguy.tv/HT/125. One thing I'm going to be interviewed. I was interviewed actually last weekend. I'm going to show up on Dave Jackson's School of Podcasting, and we're going to talk a little bit. If you're a podcaster or interested in podcasting, Dave Jackson is a great guy that kind of covers the ins and outs of starting your own podcast or doing podcasting, or how to improve the podcast that you currently have. He's out at schoolofpodcasting.com. That'll hit Monday. Today's the 11th, so Monday will be July 15th, 2013. That'll hit. Head out to his site, and if you want to hear me be interviewed on his show, we talk about podcast evangelism, which was kind of a fun subject about how do we get this? How do we get podcasts more out into the community, kind of as the norm for folks to listen to and such? And so I have a few ideas around that. And so if you want to listen to that, you can. And then of course, if you're out at YouTube, go out to theaverageguy.tv/YouTube, and that's our YouTube site. Subscribe out there. I'm going to race with Mike Howard. By the way, Mike Howard's doing pretty well. We'll know more information on his cancer situation tomorrow. So we're all pulling for Mike and appreciate Mike and all that he's done for our community. But I'm racing with Mike on YouTube to see who can get the most subscriptions. So head out there and subscribe to that. And while you're out there, theaverageguy.tv/Amazon. If you're buying anything from Amazon, we've had some great. You guys have done great on purchasing stuff, and including the average guy in that. We make a few cents, and that will allow me to pay Christian to come to Omaha so he can speak on big data. Not really, but I couldn't even begin to pay for it with those with those commissions. But all is good out there. So lots of different ways to interact with the podcast, and that'll be it for tonight. We'll stay around for some post show, talk a little more about tech, and again, you only get the post show if you're out here live. We're out here each Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, averageguy.tv/live, and if this is the first time you listen to this podcast, Christian, the last time we did this, I dumped this into several college admissions groups and got some folks to listen to it. I'm gonna do the same thing on this one. And so if you're listening to us for the first time, we're normally talking kind of tech stuff, home tech stuff, and usually around various topics. And so come back and join us again Thursday nights, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern. Appreciate everybody out in chat as well. A great chat room tonight. You guys do a great job. I appreciate you coming out this evening. Stay around for the post show. Good night, everybody.
Good night.